Hello, everybody, and thanks for watching Next Play Live, our show that focuses on athletes and their transition to careers outside of sports. Now, if you've been watching some of the last few episodes, you'll notice that we've been specifically focusing on athletes who now have careers in medicine. Today's episode is no different. Our guest today is Dr. Jeremy Towns, a graduate of Samford University in Alabama and former pro football player. The key there is former because he just became doctor a few weeks ago after graduating from the University of South Alabama's College of Medicine. On Monday, he'll be starting residency at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. We're going to ask him about his experience coming up. Let's welcome to the show, Jeremy Towns.
Hey there, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. All right, so Jeremy, during the last episode that we had last week with Mark Hamilton, former MLB player, he was telling us about how he had the goal in mind to become both a pro athlete and a pro doctor since he was a kid. We see, if we look at your LinkedIn profile, that you were studying sports medicine when you were at Samford. How long ago did you actually come up with the plan? Did you also have it far in advance?
Yes, sir. I was just like the other young man. I wanted to be a doctor since I was about 8 years old. My mother gave me a doctor's costume for Halloween, and I was just always intrigued by the doctor's outfit as well as the stethoscope. So since then, my mind has always been infatuated with the idea of being able to help people through medicine.
Yeah. And, in the week since you graduated, I think New York was the epicenter of the national outbreak. Now cases in New York have gone down, but we see outbreaks in different states across the country. Where you are, Alabama is seeing a rise in cases as well. How does this affect your road ahead as you begin residency next week?
Well, it'll definitely make it different from the personal protective equipment standpoint, as well as realizing that in Alabama, like you said, the cases are increasing. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to get in and try to help as much as I can and learn from the other physicians and do what we can to try to help flatten the curve with the COVID-19.
So let's actually talk about you helping people, because anybody that has NFL on their resume, you would be happy if that's the only big thing that you have on your resume. But you have a lot of things for us to highlight. You have experience going on mission trips and doing different, what I would characterize as charitable efforts. What's the first memory you can remember of helping others that kind of affected what seems like an affinity for doing it?
I think I started when I was younger. I just, in my mind, why not help someone is kind of my motto. But I think when I got to Samford University and I started a ministry called Ransom, it just helped me to start realizing that, I could have a place in people's lives where they could trust me to allow me to just help them through normal college life issues. And then in 2011, I think it was a tornado that hit Birmingham. And I kind of helped mobilize some of the college students at Samford University, as well as around the city of Birmingham, to go help one of the cities that was hit hard. And from then, I just have always wanted to help people.
All right. So while you're at Samford, there's the Christian ministry. You're playing football, and you have the pre-med track. Sounds like a difficult combination of responsibilities, but I know that one of your mottos was "the finish line said no." Can you explain to the audience what that means?
Well, one of my good friends, kind of like my confidant named Caleb Maxey, he's one of the guys that has always just pushed me along. He's always just been there. And one day I was on the phone talking to him, and he was like, you can't just stop at this point or this point. He was like, the finish line said no. And what that means is that in life, you operate based upon your goal, the finish line. So he was personifying the finish line as if it was a person, and was saying that if the finish line could talk, some of the things you might want to do, the finish line might speak contrary to those things because it's not aligned with the goal of actually reaching the finish line.
All right, so let's not even go to your finish line that you've reached just now. Let's actually work backwards. Before you got to Samford, it seems like the decision to go there was a last-minute decision, that you got a call for getting a scholarship there. Can you describe to us what that process was like, what your plans were before going to Samford, and just what that experience was like getting that surprise call?
So back before I attended Samford, I got a surprise call from the late, great Coach Pat Sullivan. while I was at Walgreens, I was working. We were unloading a shipment, a big truck that had come in, and I got a call over the loudspeaker that said, Jeremy, call on line 1. And so I knew none of my family members would be calling at this time because this is the time the truck comes every single week. And so I went to the call, answered it, and on the other end, it was a voice saying, this is Coach Pat Sullivan with Samford University. I've been out of town. I think it was Italy that he was at, which blew my mind that he would be somewhere like that. But at the same time, he let me know that there was a full scholarship waiting on me at Samford University. And so I went home after work, told my mother, and a few days later, I was getting a national letter of intent. And I was kind of back and forth, but really I didn't have anywhere else to go. And my mother was like, you signing this scholarship, sign right here. And she was like, I'll mail it back. And the rest was history. I ended up showing up a day before camp that year to get ready to play football.
And when you're at Samford, what is the main goal that's in your mind? I know that there can be multiple, but was there one that you favored over the other, whether it's going to the NFL or going to med school? Was there a favorite?
Well, at first, I didn't really understand the significance of having a full scholarship. So my first goal was just to be in college, just to exist. But then after a guy kind of helped me start exploring faith, my goal became to help people, literally just to help people, to want people to kind of understand the role of faith in their life. And then from there, it kind of branched out. I had a teacher, her name was Dr. Von Cross. I made a D on her test, and I was a freshman. She told me, son, you can become whatever you want to in your life. And she blew my mind because yet I was valedictorian in high school, but Samford is very tough from an academic standpoint. And so she told me I could become whatever I wanted to in my life. And the thing I knew I wanted to become was a physician. But I was like, how do I become a physician when I just made a D on your test? And I just set out from there to really want to become a physician. And then, as I was doing that, I ended up having a couple season-ending injuries in football. And so it seemed like my NFL aspirations would not be so. But my friend Nick Williams ended up challenging me after he went to the NFL. He challenged me to also to pursue the NFL.
And so we see that you had this comeback from that D in the class. We see that you alluded to another comeback, coming back from injuries. Can you explain how your first experience in the NFL went? Because what it seems to me from the outside is that you were actually heading to medical school straight out of college. Is that correct?
That is correct. So at my senior pro day, the day before my senior pro day, my mother gave me my acceptance letter for medical school. And so I didn't know until the day before my pro day. And I had a pretty good pro day. And I ended up going all the way to I think it was May. And right after the draft, I didn't get drafted, but I got a call from the New York Jets for a rookie minicamp invite, and I didn't make it on. And so it was just playing this waiting game. And I always believed that I would still go, but I wasn't really sure. And so about a week before I was about to head to medical school, I went on a mission trip to Dominica. And I told my mother before I went on that mission trip, I literally told her, God is going to have someone call me to go to a team. A team is going to call me. And my mother said, how do you know that? I was like, well, I feel like God really has shown me this. And so my mother, she was like, nah, you're making this stuff up. You're going to go to medical school. Like, we're not worried about the NFL anymore. So I get back from Dominica and I get a voicemail. And the Washington Redskins had called me a day after I left for the trip. And so I was coming back home and they were talking to me. That initial plan fell through. And so a day before I was about to head to medical school, I got another call from the Washington Redskins to fly up. So I had to call my mother to tell her to come home to drop me off at the airport. And honestly, she didn't believe me. About 5 or 6 hours after she dropped me off from the airport, I got a call from her. And she was like, were you serious? Because me and my brothers joke around a lot. So we would do something like that, like have her drop us off somewhere, then call her back saying, hey, I'm just playing. But when she realized I was serious, it blew her mind. I was only supposed to go for a workout. And so she said, go up there and come back. And so after I worked out, they decided me to they decided to offer me a free agent deal. And so the rest was history.
And if you're just joining us on the stream, you're watching our interview with Dr. Jeremy Towns. Thanks to Sarah, Nicholas, Alexandria, Ryan from New Zealand, who says this is such a great success story. Terrence, who says this is a genuine leader with a heart for the people. You guys remember that Jeremy will be taking your questions live if you have good ones to ask. So let them get in the comments, and I'll be sure to read some of them. Jeremy, so we see that through that story, there's pretty much two almost last-minute calls before two monumental moments in your life. I'm curious about what do you think would be different if you didn't have the NFL experience between you graduating from college and you entering med school?
Wow, that's a great question. The NFL changes your mindset. And so that's what I always tell people, like the mindset of the people in the NFL are like no others. A lot of times, you know, different sports outlets like ESPN and whatnot, they only show the sports side of it. But if you get around some of these guys, they're top tier leaders. Their mindset is just unmatched. The way they can get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and go work out, they know their routine. They know how to take care of their bodies. They're like lay scientists, if you ask me. And so, and they have to believe in themselves. So when I went to medical school, it's like I knew what it was to like get my job done. And so when I would be coming back home to work out, I didn't have a strength coach standing over me. I had to go work out if I wanted to have an opportunity. And so with medical school, it's the same way. You know, no one's standing over you to study. They just tell you, you know, you have a test in 2 weeks. You go to class if you want to. If you don't want to go to class, you can watch a lot of the lectures online. But it's on you to get the job done. And so that really helped me because medical school is rigorous. Mm-hmm. And it'd take a toll on you mentally if you let it. But, I mean, after I had been to the NFL, it was just like a matter of just getting the job done. It's like one way or another, you just learn to get the job done from the NFL.
And I should add a note for everybody that your NFL experience took you from Buffalo to Washington, Philadelphia, not in that order, but those three cities. I want to point to something else that you've said in the past, which is that the NFL taught you to not get too high or not get too low, or that football taught you that. Could you give me an experience from med school where you had to make sure to not let yourself get too low, and then another experience where you had to make sure to not let yourself get too high?
Yes, sir. I would love to. A lot of times people will see people like myself, and, you know, when we get these type of interviews, we only talk about our successes. But in medical school, on my first board exam called Step 1, a medical student tends to take that. Well, all medical students take it after their second year in medical school. I barely passed it. And so that board exam kind of sets your trajectory on what particular specialties you can go into. And so I was kind of in this phase where what do I do? My mother was on me. You know, if you read any of the stories about my mother, I mean, she's just that type of woman. She's just gonna let you know, like, I mean, she literally told me, like, I mean, how did you go to medical school when you make that grade? Like, what were you even doing? And I was trying to tell her, like, the test is a difficult test. But anyway, I just told myself that, you know, I would make a certain grade, a certain score on my Step 2 test, that, you know, I would come back from it. And now, granted, in that time, I started another branch of the ministry at South Alabama. And so she was like, it doesn't make sense. Like, how can you start another chapter of this ministry while you in medical school after you already just had this setback? And I ended up making the grade that I said I would make on that test. And that's without that summer I do a football camp every year. I still did the football camp. She asked me if I would not do it that year. And I was like, Mama, I have to do this camp. Like, the kids are dependent on me to do this camp. I mean, had been doing it for like 7-8 years plus by then. And so I accomplished everything I needed to accomplish with helping people and still made the grade that I needed to make on the test. And so that was me coming back from a low point, not getting too low, still believing in myself. But then even at making that a higher score on that Step 2 exam, you know, in one of my interviews, one of the going to residency, they asked me about that. And I just told them, you know, that higher score, that didn't define me either. So I never let things define me. Like circumstances, I never let them define me. Like a low test score, that doesn't define me. A high test score doesn't define me. I always try to let my identity and who I am be in my faith and let that define me. Like, what can I do for the next person? I like for that to define me more than just life events.
And speaking of mindset, we have Dr. Stephanie commenting, who says, a mindset is critical for success in any field of pursuit. Mindset is the essential ingredient. We have Nelson, who says he's inspired by you. I actually want to go back to the answer that you just gave, because I think it's an interesting thing that there can be this idea where you might want to prioritize something that you're doing for self and set aside what you're doing for others. I know that you said that you continue to serve others, but was there ever a temptation to say, I don't want to hurt my own goals. Let me put aside the ministry. Let me put aside the camp. Let me put aside any other effort I have for anybody else. Was that temptation there?
Yeah, that temptation is always there, because you have people that's always putting that in your mind. But for me, I realized that serving people is what got me here. Like, serving people is what allowed people, my professors at Stanford University, to write me great recommendation letters. Serving people and allowed me to stick through the 2-season ending injuries and say, I won't give up on football. I'll come back again. Serving people allowed me to have the passion to want to continue my pursuit of medicine, even when I might not have been the most successful academically early on. And then even now, serving people will allow me to be a great physician. And the reason is because when you approach life with other people in mind, you can't help but try to achieve excellence. And so my best, for me, a lot of these things don't mean enough. The NFL doesn't mean enough. The title of being a doctor, that doesn't mean enough. But when I can look at, a person, on one of the toughest days of their life and they meet me in the emergency room, I want to be on my A game. I want to be excellent. So it gives me an extra boost and an extra drive to try to pursue excellence in my own life.
And I have a question from the audience to ask you here, which says, how was it being surrounded by people, presumably in med school, that were only focused on medicine since day one, knowing that, you had a dynamic set of interests? Did you see yourself as sort of different from your peers?
Yeah, any environment I go into, I'm going to always see myself as different. I just feel like I was just created to be different. Not that other people can't be. It's just a lot of times in life, all people have is what they're pursuing. And if it's a dream job or this type of thing, but in the NFL, I learned this: money won't give you happiness. It give you opportunities and options, but it won't necessarily give you happiness. And then I realized this: people that I played with that would probably go into the Hall of Fame in the NFL, they was always willing to help me out, show me a new defensive line technique or something along those lines. And so in medical school, they kind of knew me as the guy that would champion this thing called Med School Fam. I actually got some wristbands made with hashtag Med School Fam on it, gave it to all the people in my classmates. So I kind of helped other people start buying into this idea that we could be a big family and go and accomplish a lot of things together and help our medical school class see ourselves as a unit and not just individuals competing with each other.
And I'll be remiss if I didn't add, there are multiple people in the stream right now from your Ransom family. Can you explain to us more about Ransom, how it came together? I've seen some of the story, but for the audience, can you explain it?
So a guy led me to faith in Christ when I was in undergrad at Stanford University. I grew up agnostic. It's just faith wasn't something that I was interested in. But he helped me to see that, God loved me, to be honest. And from that standpoint, I realized he could be near and dear and close to me. And not a faith that I have to go and just preach at people and tell people all these things. It's more of a faith to say, if I really do believe in God, I should go love on some people. And so we started at Stanford University, and then I would just meet people, help started at UAB, and then help started at other campuses with a young man like EJ Kenty. He played football at Murray State. He took it there. And I think the greatest thing right now in the current situation in the United States is that, it's a ministry with, Black, white, Hispanic. And all of them had the same opportunities to be in leadership. I've seen God just do amazing things through it and literally bring them together. Like, we've had great conversations about the racial climate in the United States, and they've been challenged to go fix it. Like, they should go out in the world to fix it, not just complain, not just, say what should be done. But I challenge them If you see something in the world that you don't like, you go change it. And so that's what the Ransom family is. It's on 7 different campuses in 4 different states. And I spend a lot of my time working with those college students. And I'll be honest, you asked me earlier about, me serving the community and how that impacts me. What about my own goals? I've achieved more goals serving this ministry than I ever would have in my life, because I'm honestly not that ambitious. But when I look at, having a fundraise for this ministry and stuff like that, I literally see these students as my family. And looking at the racial climate today, I mean, being a black man, I could never hate white people. Why? Because at the ministry, we call each other family. And so I have white brothers and sisters, so it's a different perspective of the world that I've really learned from this ministry.
No, and now we have the context behind why you're so ambitious in helping others, if not necessarily your own career. I have a question that I have no background on, no knowledge about, which comes from Andre, who says, Dr. Towns, do you have a go-to clinical reference tool?
Do I have a go-to clinical reference tool? Sometimes I use UpToDate, and then being in the ED, in the emergency room, there's a plethora of just quick resources that I go to that kind of get passed around from medical student to medical student, and now physician to physician.
And I wanted to ask you about another question, very important. You kind of alluded to it when you were talking about people of different races and the problems out there that need to be solved. It's a very ethical topic right now, but we also see that a global pandemic is also disproportionately affecting Black people around the country. I'm going to read to you some headlines here. NBC, a poll that Black Americans are most likely to know a COVID victim. NPR on May 30th, a growing data shows Blacks and Latinos bear the brunt of COVID-19. When you look at these headlines and you also see how some of the headlines are kind of indicative of larger systemic problems, I am curious about how that affects how you look at your medical career.
Yes, sir. I look at my medical career as being someone who can understand the plight of the disadvantaged, the marginalized, the people who society can tend to outcast. I think that's why I'm there. I'm there for, and not just along racial lines, of course, racial lines, but even socioeconomic, like, the homeless guy, he comes into the emergency room. I have to show him compassionate care. He should get the same level of care as if the person with more means would come into the emergency room. And then, as relates to these statistics, you're right. They just are symptoms of larger issues, because, these groups that are disproportionately affected by COVID-19 are the same groups that face some of the largest disparities in healthcare. So, COVID-19 has only has been here to shine light on these issues.
And I would like to point out some more comments in the stream. One in particular from Julie, who says, as a mom of a medical student, you are inspiring me to continue my support for my son and challenge him in his faith and service to his community. You're a gift to us all. Thank you. And Laurel says she's literally taking notes. So Laurel, thank you for watching. Thank you, Jeremy, for giving some of the audience notes. I guess I can end on serving others, because there may be some med students watching this, and I've seen some of my friends who were in the pre-med track in college when they would go on mission trips. I know that you have done the same as well. As someone who has now gone through med school, you've actually become a doctor, you're heading into residency. What do those experiences do for you? How do they affect your development in medicine?
I think those experiences have helped me to realize that it's an honor to serve, but realize that the person I'm serving also has a lot to teach me also. Many times people go on mission trips as if they have so much to offer and bring to some people that may be quote unquote disadvantaged. But when I've went to some of the very impoverished places, I realized that in some regard, they had more than me because they had a smile on their face. They had dignity about themselves. They really cared for their community, and they had a togetherness about themselves. But what I've really learned is that every day you get an opportunity to serve someone. When I was leaving the Redskins, I had just got cut, was in the airport about to fly back to Birmingham. a kid asked me, he said, "Are you an NFL player?" And I said, "No, sir," because at that point I had just been cut. And he wouldn't leave me alone. It's like this kid knew something deeper inside of me, and he wouldn't leave me alone. And I finally said, "Yes, sir. I did, blah, blah, blah." He didn't care that I wasn't still an NFL player. He just cared that I had been one. But then I would take the time to take a picture with him and sign an autograph for him. And what it showed me is that, I had a chance to serve that little kid. But at the end of the day, that kid served me more than I would have ever served that kid, because he taught me this. He taught me that on the worst day of my life, that I always still have an opportunity to make somebody else's day. And so that's what I live by now.
And that's a great place to end. Dr. Jeremy Towns, thanks for joining us. I shouldn't even say doctor anymore, philanthropist, football player. There's so many titles that we can add to that. Thanks for joining us. That was a really great story. And thanks to everyone that was joining us on the stream. Next week, we will have Patrick Hill, a registered nurse in Los Angeles, joining us as we continue this series on former athletes who are working in medicine right now. So thanks for joining us. Join us again next week, and we'll see you then.